What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. So the head for the BHW TDI motor still sitting here on the bench. Still waiting for that guy to get home so I can drop it off. He said he'll be home tomorrow, so we'll have to bring that in, drop it off. Hopefully he can get it done in a reasonable amount of time. But while we wait for this head, I got some other things to do on the truck. I'm gonna start tackling wiring, and I'm gonna start with the wiring that is associated with the truck and not the TDI. So what we got to do is strip this harness apart. There's actually two harnesses we need out of the truck. One is the main engine harness, and it also runs the transmission. The other harness is basically the battery cables, the alternator, and the starter wire. So we need to strip some harnesses apart, take out a buttload of wiring that we do not need, but we got to make sure we don't pull out anything that we do need. So we're going to dig into it today. I'm going to show you everything we're going to need to keep on these harnesses for this truck to run. A lot of this stuff isn't for it to actually make it run. It is for gauges, alternator, that kind of stuff. But we still need these wires. So let's get to work. I'll show you these harnesses. We'll start taking these things apart and getting them ready. So here on the left, that's the main harness for the motor, and then all this down here is for the tranny. Now this is the 04 harness, so this is the one I'm going to be using. The majority of the wiring, I still am going to need a few sensors and a little bit of wiring for the manual transmission, for the forward drive light, the reverse light, and a couple other things for that. But the majority of this wiring we don't need. A few things we do need is oil pressure sensor wire here. We need the water temperature sensor wire. I'm going to keep the AC wire right there. And there's probably a few other wires we need. I'm still kind of going through it and figuring out exactly what we need. And then this harness here is basically the battery cables, and then this here is a alternator plug, and then that wire there is for the starter. So basically all we need out of this harness is this connector here, which connects to the alternator and that starter wire. And the nice thing about it is it's completely separate from this main harness. This one plugs in right down here, and that's already connected to the truck, so we don't have to mess with that at all. So basically we're just going to strip this harness apart, pull this out, and then I'll probably keep this main alternator wire here. That goes from the big post on the alternator right there into the fuse box here for the alternator relays and fuses. So that just bolts right under there. So we'll keep that wiring, but we need to strip this apart. So these are the three ECU plugs. I believe these are the three ECU plugs, and then these basically are a lot of the wiring that goes up to the cluster. So the majority of the wiring for the ECU we're going to take out. We don't need, like I said, we're going to need a few of the wires for the gauges in the cluster and stuff like that. So what we're going to do, strip this harness completely down, take all this sheathing off, get it stripped down to bare wiring. Then we can pull out what we don't need. What I'm going to do, instead of just cutting all these wires out, I'm just going to unpin them. In case I do need to add something back in, I'll have all the pins and everything I need. So let's get this thing cut apart, get everything out we don't need. I think I'm going to start with that small harness, just get that out of the way, get what we need out of that, and then we'll bust this big harness out. All right, there we go. So this is what we're going to be using. Like I said, the starter wire is going to be able to I'm going to be able to leave that as is. This alternator wiring, I will have to splice into the wiring for the Volkswagen alternator. So not a big deal. We won't be using this plug or anything, but also going to save that, like I said. And then also keep the main battery cables just in case they work for the swap. So let's get this big harness up here, start taking this thing apart and getting out what we need. Alright guys, there is the harness. There's some scraps there. That's the 96 harness, which I'm going to use a few plugs from the transmission, but this is basically all we really need out of this harness. So this is one plug right here that runs from the engine harness up to the cabin harness. A lot of this goes into the cluster. So basically what we have and we need on this harness is coolant temperature, the AC plug, the oil pressure, and the vehicle speed sensor off the transfer case, or that's going to go on the transfer case on the new truck. And then we have some wiring here that was for, I believe there's a reverse light in here for the actual reverse lights on in the tail lights, and then a few other wires here that ran to the automatic transmission plug that I gotta figure out what they're for. I may need them, I may not. And then there's just a lot of cut wires here, but I'm going to leave this stuff for now in case I do need to splice into something here. So that really is about all we need. There is a check engine light wire that we need, but it is on the truck still. This is kind of set up a little bit different than the older ones. So it has these 3 plugs here that go up to this cabin cluster or cabin wiring. And then if you look up there, you can see those 2 plug-ins right there and there. Those actually plug directly into the ECU. There is a check engine light wire that we're going to need to steal out of that, and possibly a couple other wires. And also I need to hook the battery up, find some power. I know there's a lot of power wires in that connector there, and there may also be some power in here too. So we can always tap into some of these power wires to power into whatever else we need to power on the truck. So that being said, that is about what we need out of this harness, hopefully anyway. The only other thing I'm going to want to keep is this boot that bolts into the firewall. So I'm going to pull those wires through. I'll probably save both of them actually, just in case I need them. So we'll get that out, and then we'll figure out, I probably won't do this right now, but there's the blue plug here and the white plug here for the reverse light and the 4-wheel drive light that we need. So we'll wire that in. I found a diagram or a write-up on the internet of the differences between the harnesses. So I can kind of go through this harness, figure out what pins those wire into, and hopefully I can wire that into the factory pins on the truck. But that's going to be another day's project. So like I said, that's about all we need. Pretty simple for the Toyota side of the harness. All right guys, there's one other little harness that we need. This is basically a neutral safety switch for the automatic tranny. And most of these wires run into this one plug-in. That is for one of the body plugs right where that plugs in. So the other couple wires here that are cut ran into this other harness here, which the wires are right there. So what we're going to work on now, I know I said I'm not going to do it, but I'm kind of bored and I just dropped my head off. You can see there's no more head, so we're going to be waiting for that. He said about a week, but I want to get started on this wiring. So what we got to do is reverse wiring, which basically, as far as I know, it is this black and red and the red and black wire that we need to hook to the reverse switch on the transmission. So what I found was this little write-up here, and you can see reverse switch, and these wires actually are the same color. And then I don't know what this is for, why they have 2 different clutch switches. My truck only has one. The 96 only had 1 switch. So those wires are the black and yellow and black and white. So those both run into this plug here. So we're gonna hook these 2 wires up to the clutch switch. And then I also have the clutch cancel switch that mounts on the dash that we need to wire in as well. So what I'm gonna get started with, make sure these are the reverse lights. We're gonna hook this up. Basically all that switch does is connect these 2 wires inside the switch so power can run through the switch back to the taillights. So I'm gonna plug this into the truck. I'm gonna just wire these together real quick and then we'll fire it up, see if the reverse lights will light up. If that is all good, all we'll have to do is extend these wires down to the tranny and hook those up. And then if that works out, we'll dive into the clutch switch, get these wired in, get the clutch cancel switch wired in. And I also found a couple other diagrams. There's that one there, and then I found this one here, which are a little bit different, but they're pretty similar, so we're gonna just go for it. It's gonna be a little bit weird because I have a 96 harness for the 5-speed, and then the rest of the wiring in the truck is from an 04, and they actually changed the wiring quite a bit, so we're gonna have to figure it out. One other thing I may need help from you guys with is the vehicle speed sensor for the speedometer. I believe the ECU kind of runs that whole speedometer system, and I'm not going to be running the ECU at all. It's not going to be in the truck whatsoever. So I'm wondering if you guys know, can you directly wire these directly up to the speedometer, or does it have to be ran through the ECU? There's only 3 wires. I figured there's probably a power ground and a signal wire, but I don't know. I can't find any info on it. So let me know if you have any ideas for that vehicle speed sensor. So this is where we're mostly going to be working, is with these 3 plugins right here. A lot of these are for the tranny and engine harness, and they run up to the cluster for gauges, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to plug this one in right here, and then we will tie up those 2 wires together and see if these reverse lights will work. Like I said, this should be the black with red and red with black. We can just tie these 2 together and the reverse lights should come on. There we go, just like that. Easy peasy, just those 2 wires I hooked up. So now we know that's for the reverse. I'm gonna label those so I don't forget what they are. And let's bust into this whole clutch system. All right guys, so this black red wire is the one that's a power wire that we're gonna use to power the reverse light. Also is connected to the starter relay up here, and that is the wire we need to tie off into the clutch cancel switch and the clutch switch on the pedal. And you can see in this diagram, this black red here tees off to the reverse switch, comes over and hits the clutch switch as well. This diagram doesn't show this clutch cancel switch, but we're gonna wire that in too. So what we gotta do is take this wire, the black with the red, we're gonna tee that into the clutch switch on the pedal, tee that into here. There's a black red right there. Then we got a wire in this other wire, which is a white with the black. That's kind of the same deal. You can see right here on the other side of the clutch switch is a white with the black. This is all a ground actually. You can see right here, and then it tees off and it grounds the clutch cancel switch as well. So what we got to do is tie those in together and ground that, and then from the ignition we need to find this wire here, the black with the yellow, hook that up to the clutch cancel switch, and then we should be good to go. We can try it out and see how it works. Alright guys, I got a little excited. I got this hooked up, I tried it out, and I popped a fuse. So I kind of went back through it, and all these diagrams, they're not working in conjunction with the colors that are on this truck. This is a 96 diagram. Like I said, they've changed a lot, and these wires don't line up. So what I had to do is, this is the starter relay right here. So I pulled this off so I could see underneath at the wires, and you can see the little green wire right there, if you can see that. So that green wire runs up into the same harness here, right here. So the hot power wire goes to orange black, and that one tees off into the black red for the switch, and then this black red here goes back up to the signal for the starter relay to tell the starter relay to turn on and turn the starter. But I haven't tried this yet, so I got the starter wire right here. I'm just going to use my test light, plug that into there, and then we'll test the function of the switch. And it was kind of a dead giveaway when I turned the ignition on and hit the switch. It should light up, and it never did that. So we're going to throw the relay back in, and we'll see if this thing will do anything. All right, let's see if this works. Let's throw the key in, ignition on. Nothing popped yet. Let's hit the switch. There we go. It's really dim. I mean, you can see it. It's kind of light out, but either way, the switch is on. So now we'll turn the key to the start position, and if that lights up, we are wired right. Nope, that still doesn't do anything. Alright guys, I've been screwing around with this for like an hour now, probably even longer than an hour. I cannot get the system to work with this clutch cancel switch at all. And even on some of my diagrams, I don't know if maybe the newer like 01 to 04 trucks or 02 to 04 don't have this switch, because all the diagrams I can find for the newer trucks do not have this switch in it, and I cannot get it to work with the switch. I don't know, maybe it is bad, but either way, I got it to work with just the clutch switch on the pedal. So I have basically this green wire goes up to the starter relay, and then this black with a yellow stripe wire is hot when you're in start, not when you're on, but when you turn the key to start it, this wire gets hot. So I can get my key, get it in the ignition, and push the clutch in, and I got power. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not too extremely worried about having the clutch cancel switch, because I never really even use it in any of my other trucks. So I think I'm just going to wire it like this, and we should be good to go. As far as four-wheel drive light, we still have to figure that out. I got to take the dash apart, get the cluster out, see if there is a spot. I assume there is a spot or a light already in the cluster for four-wheel drive, so I'll have to wire that in. It should be the same as the reverse light, where it's just a power in and then the other wire goes up to the bulbs. So we'll figure that out once we get this cluster out. But how this clutch is wired up right now, I think that'll work just fine. Unless I find a way to get that switch to work, I might try to test it and see if that switch is bad. But like I said, I'm not too worried about having that cancel switch. All right, we got the cluster out, and I am working on that four-wheel drive light. So what you got to do is just get your cluster, find the bulb for the four-wheel drive. It does have one, which is right this second one, or this middle one right here, and you can follow these tracer lines right here. So this bottom one, you can see it's a common, it hits every bulb. That is power. And then you can follow this other side up, and it wraps all the way around right up here to the fourth pin over on this last connector. So we need to somehow get a ground here to illuminate that bulb, and I got the wire here, so you can see that wire sticking out there. That was just to test it. So this wire actually runs down to this connector here, and it has a pin in this connector, but then in the other side of the connector it's empty. So what I need to do is pull a pin. I'll probably just pull this other green wire here because it is cut and we're not using it. So I'll pull that pin out, stick it into the correct pin, and then we'll figure out a way to get that a ground when the transfer case is in four-wheel drive, and that should light up the light. Alright, we got this plugged in, and this white wire here is just a little extender so I can ground it. So let's throw the ignition on, and this light's right over here. So I'm just going to take this wire, ground it right down there, and we got the four-wheel drive light. So now we just got to figure out a way to ground it through that switch and get it to work that way. And I'm not really sure if the older trucks use a ground or a power for the cluster like this. This all uses like a ground trigger to power these lights. I'm not sure if the 96 setup is that way, but I guess we could haul this tranny over here, get it sitting here, get the switch kind of wired up a little bit, and see if we can get it to work with the actual transfer case. All right, so I got this wiring plug in here, just two wires. So I'm no scientist with electronics, so I really don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try to ground one side. I'll probably have to actually ground it to the truck, but I'll extend both these wires. I'll ground one wire, and then I'll hook up the other one to the green wire that we just hooked up to the cluster, and when we switch it into 4-wheel drive, that should send a ground through the switch and out the other side of the switch. So I don't know if it'll work. Let's try it and see what it does. All right, you can see here the green wire is hooked up to here, which runs up to the new wire that eventually makes its way into the cluster, and then the other white wire I just have ran up and grounded up on the steering column. So let's get the key on. You can see there's no light on now. Let's throw it in 4-wheel drive and check it out. We got a light. That was easy. A lot easier than I thought it would be. So 4-wheel drive light should be good. Like I said, I think I'm just gonna leave this clutch system just with this one switch, just because I can't get the freaking clutch cancel switch to work, and I never really even use them. So my main goal is just to figure out these lights, make sure we can get them to work, and I think we should be good. All right guys, real quick, I have amazing news. I hooked up the VSS. So I checked all these wires for the VSS, wherever I put it right here. I checked these wires and I got continuity all the way up to the cluster with the 3 wires. So I pulled the sensor out of the tranny, I hooked everything up, and you can see here, once I put the key in, so if I take the sensor in my hand and I spin that as fast as I can, you can see it is working. So I haven't touched anything with this whole VSS system. This is all wired factory. So I guess we don't need to do anything with it, unlike what I thought. Every diagram I saw, it looked like all the wiring went through the ECU and then up to the cluster, but these are directly wired right into the cluster from the factory. So we are good. I am so excited that is going to work. So the only other issue we're going to have is, you can see this tranny here has a mechanical or a cable driven speedo right here. So what we have to do, Marlin Crawler makes an adapter for that. They make an adapter from the cable to the 3-pin electronic speedo. So I'm gonna buy that adapter, we'll hook it up and see if it'll work with that adapter. I believe it should. I don't know why it wouldn't, but just to make sure, I'll pick it up, hook it up before we do all this and button up all this wiring, just to make sure it's gonna work. So this is the majority of the wiring that we need to do on the Toyota side of things. We still have to wire in the check engine light, the glow plug light, and the tach, but that is gonna be through an adapter or a little converter from Fast Forward Automotive. It's called a CAN to dash, so all you really gotta do is hook up the CAN high, CAN low lines from the Volkswagen ECU, and then it has outputs for the tach, the glow plug light, and the check engine light, and then it also has controls for a radiator fan, so I might use that as well. I don't have that yet, so we can't really do a whole lot yet other than just locate those wires, which shouldn't be a big deal. We'll just trace them from the cluster out to those connectors that we were messing with. I know all those wires are right there in those connectors, so shouldn't be a big deal to find them. Well, that's a wrap, guys. Really hope you enjoyed the video. Go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.